two-phase plan to eliminate the Hebrew people. Number one, demoralize the Hebrew men by reducing them to slavery and work them to death. And secondly, kill all the male Israelite children, which over a period of time would force the girls, the Hebrew girls, to intermarry with the Egyptians, and the racial distinction would be lost. And that would be that. But it wasn't going to be as easy as Pharaoh thought. The more the Israelites were persecuted, the more they multiplied. Give a guy a hard day's work, he's going home to mama. And secondly, the Hebrew midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. I wish we had a nation like that today. And then Exodus 2 to verses 1 to 4 tell us that into this word of genocide was born an Israelite boy who would later become known as Moses. His parents, Amram and Jochebed, hid him as long as they could because they were supposed to have put him to death, remember. See, but they kept him alive. But it became harder and harder to conceal this little baby. You know how that is, right? A new little baby comes into church, and they'll sit here for the first few months being pretty quiet. But after a while, they start getting their energy, and they find their voice and their big toe and everything else, and they start getting really active. It became harder and harder. I suspect, though, that every day as Moses' mother, his real mother, fed him and changed him and clothed him, she held him close and prayed to the Lord God to protect him. I suspect all you mothers do the same thing for your children today. And I've got good news for you. God listens to your prayers. If one is going astray right now, don't give up and don't stop praying. God will bring them through this. And finally, when they could conceal him no more, his family made a waterproof bassinet. It's called an ark in the Bible, but it's not a huge boat. It's just a little pitch-covered basket, and lovingly, prayerfully placed the infant Moses in the reeds along the Nile River. What happened next, folks, was so ironic that only God could have made this happen. The very day that Moses was placed in the water, the daughter of the very Pharaoh who had ordered the death of all Israelite children came with her female servants to the Nile River to bathe. She saw the baby Moses. She held him in her arms. She loved the child. She had compassion on him and ultimately took him home and raised him, listen to this, right under the nose of the Pharaoh that had decreed that all Hebrew children be put to death. For one, it's one thing to talk about a woman's right and phrases that we've found comfortable today, like terminating a fetus or family planning or whatever the latest junk words are. But when you actually see God's gift of a newborn baby, a precious human life, I think it forces you to rethink your position about arbitrarily taking that life as a child, of a child. I heard a man not too long ago that was one of the major doctors involved in abortion who had a complete turnaround and is now an advocate for right to life and speaks at all their conventions. And you know what changed his mind? When they invented that little thing called, well, I don't know what they call it, but it's what they use to do amniocentesis. You know, when they rub the little jelly on the belly and ultrasound. I got to get my words up to date here. When he saw an actual ultrasound of a child, all its fingers there, suck its thumb, life going on in the formative stage, he said, I cannot do this anymore. And he radically changed his position. So here's Moses, now loved by the Pharaoh's daughter, And Moses' older sister comes to the Pharaoh's daughter and asks this question, shall I find a woman to nurse the baby for you? Well, hello, if she could nurse the baby, she's the baby's what? Mother. Yes, the Pharaoh's daughter says, and I will pay her to do so. She knew what she was doing. And in a further touch of providential irony, Moses' mother is paid by Pharaoh's daughter to nurse her own child. And in just a very few hours, Moses is back under his mother's arms, under the protection of Pharaoh's daughter, and under the nose of the evil Pharaoh. Now this Moses is eventually called by God to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land, but not until God does several things. You know, you might think your salvation is just saying, okay, Jesus, come into my heart, but let me tell you there are so many things that God did to make it possible for you to come into the family of God. Here's what he did to deliver the children out of Israel. He didn't just want to deliver them, he wanted to show Egypt that there was only one true God. And so he clearly demonstrates his control over all that the Egyptians worshipped as gods. We're going to see, you know, that when the Nile River turned to blood, it's because they believed that the Nile River was a god. And when the cattle broke out, you know, with all these infectious sores somewhere along in the process, they worshipped Apis, the sacred bull of Egypt. He's clearly showing that he has control over the gods when those plagues take place. They weren't just random things. Secondly, he clearly demonstrates that he alone is God for Israel's benefit. You got to remember that Israel was living among pagans for almost 400 years. That's going to be the Passover, when God brings that last plague on Egypt and all the Israelites are miraculously spared. And remember that the deliverance of the children of Israel had to accomplish two things. Number one, Israel must be set free. But secondly, Pharaoh's army must be completely and utterly destroyed. Otherwise, they just follow them out and capture them again. The children of Israel at that point weren't ready for warfare. And so Israel must be set free and the enemy must be destroyed. Hello, welcome to the cross. For this reason, Christ came into the world that he might what? Destroy the works of the devil. And then, of course, deliverance must be from something, and that's Egypt and bondage, but also to something. God didn't save those people to wander in the wilderness on minimum daily requirements for 40 years. Another thing must happen. Israel must have guidance and protection as they journey to the promised land. We're going to read about a miraculous pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire by night that guided the children of Israel all the way to the promised land. Freshly out of completely pagan idolatry worshiping culture, they would now learn about the life that God would bless. He gave them the 10 Commandments. Did they need it? At the very time he was up there giving them the commandments not to make graven images, guess what they were down in the valley doing? Making graven images. They were idol worshipers at heart. God had to change that. And then lastly, God, knowing the human propensity towards sin, there must be a place to find forgiveness when they sinned against God. And he's going to give them a beautiful and glorious tabernacle. So this is going to be, I think, an interesting journey for us. We're going to follow Israel through their failures and their misfires and their disciplines and their eventual victory as at long last they enter the promised land. Several times you're going to say, how could they be so blind and so stupid to the blessings of God? And then you're going to say, wait a minute. I think I've been that way too. At each stage of their journey, we're going to see how their successes and their failures typify what we do. as believers. So off we go.